All right, welcome back, everybody. We are down to our final two presentations. The next group everybody will be hearing from is American Forest. So I will hand it off to John Dale to go ahead and get started.
Thank you, Katie. And thank you all for being here, and thank you for having American Forest and UTRGV, University of Texas Rio Grande Valley. I'll be holding it down myself, the presentation myself this morning. Patty is out of pocket. So I'm going to give you all an overview of our project that we've developed for the accelerator over the last several months, and it's entitled Transboundary Conservation Through Resilience in the Delta, the Rio Grande Rio Bravo Delta, developing a 5-part action plan for success. Just to kind of give you some bearings geographically, the region, our project area, straddles basically the Tamaulipas, the South Texas and Tamaulipas border, and in Texas, what we call the Lower Rio Grande Valley. So basically four Texas counties, and then on the Tamaulipas portion of the Delta, we've got about 7 or 8 municipios that we're bringing into this project area, and it's important to note, from a biodiversity standpoint, our region is part of the what we call the Tamaulipan Biotic Province. So this biotic province extends roughly 400 miles north to south from San Antonio, Texas, down to Ciudad Victoria, roughly that area. And so to the west, we're not technically Chihuahuan Desert, but we're bordering on that ecoregion as well on the west side, on the Texas Hill Country, and then some of the on the south end, we've got some of that more tropical forest down around the Cielo Biosphere and that kind of area. So long story short, a lot of that biodiversity actually works its way. That neotropical biodiversity is working its way up into the South Texas counties. And then of course northeastern Tamaulipas. So these are some visuals of the different habitats that we collectively consider to be thorn forest, thorn scrub. Different, the semantics are different, obviously, but basically a semi-arid woodland landscape, woodland ecosystem, and so federally endangered species, trust species, the ocelot, just a really high biodiversity. Certainly one of the Lower Rio Grande Valley of Texas is certainly one of the biodiversity hotspots in the U.S. considered to be. So that kind of frames a little bit of what we're looking at in terms of ecosystems, natural ecosystems, and then to kind of take a look at how the anthropogenic disturbance has kind of settled over this particular part of the Rio Grande Basin over the last 100+ years. And looking at the project area there, we basically have, if we're looking collectively at both sides of the Delta, we still probably don't have more than maybe 15 to 20% of the pre-existing land cover. Probably the thorn scrub or thorn forest ecosystem, that portion that existed roughly 100 years ago, most of that has been cleared for agriculture and now urban development, just within that time period, the last century. And there's a graphic there that kind of gives you an idea of what's just happened over time, going back into the 1930s, and that's Cameron County, Texas, there around Harlingen and Brownsville. That 1930s imagery was stitched together from aerial photography, and then you've got 83 and 01 that were satellite based imagery. And if there was another version of that there was a D entry for that in 2023, it would more or less look like 2001. In terms of the lack of the fragmentation of the habitat and the loss of that woodland ecosystem that originally existed here at the expense of development. So that is kind of like an overview of what has been going on here. And the trajectory on the Tamaulipas side is the same. around Matamoros and Reynosa, and those between that area, you have just large expanses of row crops and that kind of thing that were brought down a little bit later than what happened on the Texas side. But both of those areas were really cleared out in the 20th century. Wanted to give y'all a little bit of context on our, some of the unique conservation challenges we have here. Some of them not so unique to the Rio Grande Basin, but then some of them unique to this final stretch of the river, this delta that we work in. Of course, I pointed out the extreme landscape fragmentation. So these are big picture kind of challenges. A lot of that was ongoing, throughout most of the 20th century. Since NAFTA, the economic catalyst, right? Really, since that went through passage in the mid 90s, the landscape has changed even more. So a lot of those areas, these areas that were natural landscapes 100 years ago that turned into farmlands, working lands. Those working lands have been giving way to urbanization pretty constantly over the last 25 to 30 years around McAllen, Brownsville, this whole area. So that's something that really has intensified in recent decades. And then along with all of that comes what we generally have here with the populace is a general apathy towards preservation or restoration practices. And then if we're looking at nutrient cycling or any of these other ecosystem processes that might have been in place naturally at some point in the past, with that loss, with that fragmentation and that rapid urbanization, we're just seeing a lot of diminished ecosystem processes, relict, if you will. And so really trying to get a handle on that is part of what we'll talk about as we go through the presentation. And then, what I would distinguish is like, one-dimensional transboundary growth dialogues. If it's really just about the economics, the symbiosis between Tamaulipas and Texas, Mexico and Texas, Mexico and the U.S. here through the valley, through the Lower Grand Valley is really about, the headline there is really always about the economic development at the expense of health dialogues and of course conservation dialogues, which is what we're talking about here. If you look at root causes, sure, colonial legacies and economic development, this ongoing void that we have in early education around sustainability concepts, and especially in public schooling, the silos that exist, the minimal information sharing between any number of conservation stakeholders, ourselves included here, they're working out of the region, and then in the background this antagonism, in both directions over transboundary resource management, read water, right? And on the right there, you can see just kind of a schematic of what that looks like in this region. There's close to 20 Texas irrigation districts on the Texas side, with their distinct boundaries and geographies, and then some larger areas that are irrigated in Tamaulipas. So it is a different dynamic down here. The water, our water basic, I would say 80 to 90% of our fresh water that comes through here, that we pull out for any number of uses is sourced from Coahuila and Chihuahua and in some of the other states to the north. So it's the opposite dynamic than what we have in the Colorado, where a lot of these water sources rise on the U.S. side. So that's always in the background, that consideration. Consequences, missed opportunities, clearly for regional land use planning, that minimizes restoration impact. The inability to really pull together competitive, joint funding proposals that in this case can lead to baseline studies of ecosystem dynamics and processes, and then without those, you lose that potential to develop nature-based solutions for climate resilience. And then certainly ecological and community resilience, therefore remaining at odds as inaction occurs or things don't occur. So our objective with this project has been to develop what we're calling a 5-part action plan that would promote and facilitate, that keyword linkages, the metaphorical, the landscape linkages and the cultural linkages and the project-based linkages that we're looking for between, stakeholders on both sides of the Delta. And so just really quickly, the goal is to develop this action plan in a way that we can identify, ecological and community resilience goals that are integrated. We don't have to identify, we're not looking to identify separate sets, that would be part of the process as we work through this, and then kind of marrying those two and see where they can come together. And so that, if, in other words, if we're not addressing what this is an urbanizing area, right? And if we're not addressing what the ultimate value of conservation could be for this growing populace, we're really missing the mark. If we're looking strictly at species recovery goals for under ESA and that kind of thing, that's always going to be there, and that's always going to be a motivation for an agency like the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service or a similar group in Mexico. But we really need to do our due diligence and identify that integration, goals that can be integrated between the two. And so along those same lines, and I talked to this earlier about baseline research, we need to work together as partners across the river to identify joint research priorities. And that will look like, ideally demonstration projects that can further establish that codependence, just keep hitting that same theme on integrated community resilience goals and then start developing research around it. And we feel like that's a really important thing for this region going forward. And then quantify the impacts of reforestation on ecosystem services. That will be an ongoing part of this action plan. And then the other two parts of it, establish, formal transboundary information sharing pathways between conservation partners here in the Delta. That's something that American Forests and myself have been, looking to tee up for the last several years. And we feel like hopefully through commitment from the accelerator that we can actually advance that here in the short-term future in ways similar to what's being done in other parts of the basin. But that's remained a little bit elusive for us down here. And then identify sites where long-term reforestation monitoring will be conducted. That long-term reforestation monitoring is something to develop those benchmarks around the value of reforestation in this region and, American forest reforestation. That's the angle we're taking on this. The target community and the partners, we're looking at, state and federal agencies, local governments, of course, a nonprofit like American Forest, the Nature Conservancy, and then community groups, landowners. They all have a part to play in this. And this project, what would come out of this, 2-year effort would be designed to serve transboundary land managers, researchers, land use planners, and certainly the impact would be felt by communities. What we are proposing is a bi-monthly form of engagement. So bi-monthly meaning every other month in this case, for larger partnership meetings where we work towards adopting action plan recommendations that come out of technical advisory meets, and those advisory meets would be more like monthly. And that's where, the brain trust, the science the researchers would be able to put together a lot of their recommendations, for addressing, for action items that would address the plan. And then the plan would be to have an annual in-person conference, so 2 of those total, to present a compliments and to really just codify actions and follow on steps. The quarterly update, this is something we've talked about as well, having a quarterly update come out certainly in English and Spanish, and communicate. The idea there being communicating and replicating some of the work that we're doing and others that are doing around the region. And these forums also give the network a chance to expand over time as we bring in additional players. This is who we have commitments from right now. A sampling of that. So again, check, not necessarily checking boxes, right? But understanding that, a lot of these folks have been out there. Well, there's representatives out of each one of these groups that have been out there in one shape or form doing this work for a long time. It's how do we bring them together in this new format and start learning from each other, or kickstarting that process for building out conservation within this region. If you look at that, clearly, I mean, there's everybody's got, there's a real division of labor there in terms of the work. There's a lot of specialization there, but anything from folks who are looking at, the educational aspect, the primary education aspects like Region 1 to ecotourism, so there is sustainability and resilience kind of written through this whole kind of palette of partners here, the potential for achieving that in this region. So this is kind of like my process. My process for working describing the metrics and evaluation process. And I won't read through it and, just across the board, but if you look, there's a couple here and a couple on the other page, the next page, but really looking as a metric to establish that resilience network with the kind of, level of the composition of partners that I previously mentioned, and really wanting to kind of, over time, over the project, the life of the project, boil it down to, a total of 10 integrated, resilience goals. And then, as we're working through that, as the group works through that process, through the evaluation process, do these, which goals, or does a particular goal that we've proposed, does it address the priorities in both community and ecological resilience? And we keep, for ecological resilience, I mean, that could be species recovery, but maybe not all, maybe something on that end of the spectrum doesn't, is a little too far over, and we need to be talking more about climate adaptation within the ecosystem, something that we've been, kind of championing, American Forest has been championing here for several years on climate adapted reforestation here in the region. But those kinds of things. This is an example. And then, what realistic joint implementation strategy, just be realistic about this, what versions of this can we really work to scale, and get buy-in, on over the next decade from elected officials and that kind of thing. And then the nuances, does it take into account the nuances that occur on each side of the delta? Does each goal address those nuances? And that could be anything from, the land governance, could be anything that I'm looking at that one in particular, but that could be anything from, the ejido structure versus, county government lands on the Texas side. So there's those things to consider. Performance metric too, looking at those research priorities that will advance those goals, and that will keep those goals front and center over time, something that we can hang our hat on over time. And that's that evaluation, bullet point 1. Will they reinforce, will the findings that come out of looking ahead, will the findings that come out of this research, will they reinforce, or could they reinforce, the importance of that joint integration between the resilience goal sets, we'll call them. Equal participation, what kind of research does the research promote that? And then, of course, kind of like a big one here, to what extent can these priority research areas be addressed through multidisciplinary study, the social end, the science end, that kind of thing. Can we get more, what the bang for our buck kind of thing? Can the research, address those multidisciplinary data study sets? And then, of course, to what extent can we standardize measures? And I'll just keep going through here. we have we have an existing thorn forest conservation partnership. This is a network of conservation stakeholders here on the Texas side that have been working over the last 5 years to develop a landscape level strategy, conservation strategy for the region. What we've been intent on doing for a while is to expand that partnership into Tamaulipas, and in so doing, enabling some formal, transboundary information sharing on reforestation practices. Folks are going at it different ways. What's working south of here? What's working in Texas? Can we cross pollinate that kind of the concept there? And then those are some of the bullet points. And then lastly, a performance metric around a mapped network of monitoring sites, really critical moving forward. These are things that haven't existed before. And this network would be composed of sites on public and private lands. We're looking for a large variation in management practice, management practices on these different lands. And certainly sizes and some of this nuance that would be worked out by the larger group. But the big take home here is, what, based on their location, what are the ecosystem services that these thorn forest, patches or monitoring sites, what are they providing for communities, for the ecosystem, for wildlife? What kind of values can we dig in on there? Getting ready to wrap up here in a couple of slides. Key milestones. That's a timeline there. So looking to have our first annual meeting in person in November, and then of course there would be a follow-up meeting next year, in-person meeting, but then monthly, through each quarter, really, whether it's the technical advisory groups on a monthly basis or partner meetings every other month. Really, just kind of working through, the quarters 1 through 4, really trying to identify the goal development in that first year, and then kind of tacking on, once we've got a hold on that, tacking on the research priorities as a focus for year 2. And so resource requirements, funding, partners, and meeting space, as crazy as that sounds. Funding wise, looking at a dedicated full-time staff position potentially, and or staff time for staff, the team leaders, myself, Patty, some of the other folks that will kind of step up over time within the group. And looking for, foundation grants, corporate sponsorships to make that happen. And then really, I guess, leveraging existing funds. That there's going to be a significant amount of that, clearly, with an effort like this. Looking to have a graduate student, kind of involved, as part of this, either through, certainly potentially through part-time coordination, but for sure developing a research project that kind of captures our whole process over the next couple of years. And with the right level of funding, that could be, that could also be a postdoc, that kind of thing. Firm up commitments from partners here coming up. And then the huge part of this is securing travel stipends, and then meeting spaces here. We've got a pretty good hold on that, we feel like, at this stage. And so just, again, some of the specific challenges, mitigation strategies, maintain some of one challenge is we can see up front is maintaining that visibility with decision makers, elected officials in this case. And the green bullet there, the mitigation strategy would be to educate and embrace those end goals. As everybody faces the next challenge, maintaining consistent partner dynamics, we feel like we're in a good place to leverage momentum with that existing TCP partnership that I discussed. And then our role as an incoming federal contractee for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service on border wall mitigation funding, which is something we've been working towards for a long time down here. It's basically creating what I've been working to do for American Forestry is to create a program. And we've been doing the thought leading and the partnership development, but with this incoming funding, we're actually going to be able to develop a program around working with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, nursery management, seed banking, some of those on the ground aspects for reforestation here that we'll be stepping into over the next several years with that funding. So that's pretty exciting for us. Happy to elaborate on any of that if y'all would like. The dominant regional conservation narrative is border wall impact for us, and so we need to remain mindful of that, but aware of the limits of agendas that are activist only. That's certainly an issue in this area. In terms of who we invite into the partnership and where their long-term thoughts are in terms of development of the network. And then begin broadening the public's perception of our conservation needs to move it away from that activist centric kind of concept. And an example would be is what we're already working on here: community empowerment through restorative practices, through restoration, habitat restoration. Am I gonna get the hook here? Sorry.
You got about 1 more minute, John.
Okay, cool. So you can see through there, this is our experience: competitive national funding pools of over $1 million. This is what I've encountered up to this point. An extreme bias among reviewers. I'll just put it that way. And then working to educate, those agencies are pursuing other funding avenues. The last slide. This is what we're looking at in terms of budget. For 100K, we can move into that, full-time coordinator position for the first year. And then my idea is to leverage that with some of this existing funding coming in that I discussed. And so in either category, we're pretty adamant about finding support for a graduate student, because we really feel like this is more than anything else, or as much as anything else, is an educational opportunity. We want to capture what happens over the next couple of years on this. That's it. That's all I got. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Feel free to leave your slides up if you want to reference back to them, but you can also pull them down. And I will turn it over to our evaluators. I don't see any hands up yet, but feel free to just come off mute.
Thanks, John, for that presentation. It was great. And congratulations on where you've gotten to so far in terms of your planning. I had a question about one of the last things that you just mentioned. This project includes an element of community empowerment through restoration, and I'm curious to know what stage the project's at in terms of identifying or conducting research around the community's needs and defining community resilience. And kind of related to that, one of my follow-up questions is, how are you thinking about integrating the social science perspective into the research needs of the project?
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of developing the network, we have pre-existing. There's that pre-existing relationship element that we're bringing into this. Let me back it up here. Several of the partners on here are organizations that we have already interfaced with and actually have open projects with. We have been developing. American Forest, in conjunction with some of these partners on this slide, have been developing what we're calling community forests over the last 2 years. So these might look like 1 acre sites in areas that are, I'm going to call the whole region underserved. But these are the areas where we're working to situate these community forests. The idea is to have an amenity there for the population there, for folks to use over time. It's not going to happen overnight. It's a forest. It has to develop. But finding the parts of the region that are maybe the least developed, or that will have the most impact for folks as they kind of move in and kind of fill in these spaces that are currently farm fields, that kind of thing. They're a lot of these areas will be developed over the next 20 to 25 years with the growth trajectory we have here. So finding ways to kind of locate them in these community forested areas that are going to take have the most advantage for those folks over time. And then working with, in this case, I'm thinking of a project with Hidalgo County Precinct 4, but finding ways to add value to that, doing matching to build like other amenities into it, like ponds or walking trails, that kind of thing. So that I guess on the question on the social aspect, that's kind of like the sweet spot for how we see scaling this over time around the social impact. I think I forgot your other question. Sorry. Yeah. But that's the concept here. And as far as the research, okay, I think the research, you asked about the research. Going into these areas, and this is where I really need Patty to talk about this aspect of it. Her experience has been to go into is a transboundary experience where she's been working on both sides around human health. So in what way, not just in terms of situating these, but what is the impact? What is the short and the long-term impact of these reforested areas for flood mitigation? So there, that touches the climate, the social resilience aspect that we're seeing down here. I mean, year after year of flooding, that kind of thing. And of course, that's going to be focused in these marginal areas where a lot of the low income development is. And that is, those areas are part of the landscape now. We can't incorporate them anyway, but we can build these amenities. What I would argue are amenities and certainly nature-based solutions going forward. Now we need the research to kind of move ahead with this so we can kind of start quantifying that and making the case for scaling that over time to the local elected officials.
Thank you.
We've got a few minutes if there are other questions.
One
question.
Yeah, one question I had for you, John. I know you just mentioned like the long term being the 20 to 25 years. What's your process for starting to identify where kind of which the locations for the different kind of projects that you'll be undertaking over the next, 1 to 2 years as you kind of set up this network, and then, moving forward, into that multi-decade timeframe, which is great.
No, absolutely. Thank you, Faye. So we've got a head start on that process on the Texas side. So the TCP, or the Thorn Forest Conservation Partnership that I spoke of earlier, has in the last year, this came out last summer. This is our Thorn Forest Conservation Plan, and really what this is a spatially explicit model of the Texas side of the Delta, and where we would like to see, what we call top. We went through a spatial analysis to develop this, and this is what you're seeing there. So these are top potential restoration sites that we've identified. So 80,000 plus acres that we as an organization will be targeting. The low hanging fruit are obviously public lands, fish and wildlife lands in this region, no Forest Service. But over time, and then of course working with private landowners, we're moving ahead on those fronts programmatically. So any of these areas that are in magenta kind of color, any of these are kind of areas that we can target. And there's an urbanized boundary here where a lot of the development is. So we can target those. Those would be the first targets on the Texas side. We have a little bit of that for Tamaulipas, but this is where we really need to kind of pull in, leverage some of those GIS resources that we have in-house within American Forest, and with some of our partners to kind of create this same roadmap for Tamaulipas. Yeah. But that's how we would look at this going forward. I mean, if you look at that plan there, I mean, realistically looking at that, I mean, that's decades of work. That's a couple lifetimes of work to try to assemble something like that, even a portion of that, like one corridor of that. But we've committed to that. I guess that's what I want to get across as an organization. And so we just really need to do it. We need to be cognizant of the need to do it for species recovery. And that's a narrative I deal with, very frequently, like y'all do. I mean, ocelot recovery in this region, that's the charismatic species. But when I'm at the table, it's, I make a firm argument, and everything I've described this morning, a firm argument for the social impact of this, So I hope that answered it, Faye. Sorry.
It did. No, that was great. Thanks so much, John. And great presentation.
Thank you.
All right, we've probably got time for one more. Ernesto, Citlali, if you have any questions, but if not, we can also go to break a minute, one whole minute early. All right.
I'm good. Thanks for the presentation.
Okay. Okay. All right. Great. Thanks so much, John. If you want to jump on and hear Terra Habitus, our final presentation, they'll get started on the Vimeo stream in about 15 minutes. But thank you so much. This is great.
Thank you guys. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
We'll
Take
talk soon.
Bye-bye.
It's my last day on earth, I wanna spend it with you.
right, welcome back, everyone. Thank you for your patience while we lost our internet there for a few minutes, but we are back up and running. And I'm so pleased to introduce our final team and their presentation for the day. Terra Habitus is up next. So without further ado, I will turn it over to you all, Jen and Lorenzo. And knowing that we started a little bit late, you've got until about 12:25, and then we'll go to questions.
Well, good morning. Hello, everybody. So nice to be here with you. I'm Lorenzo Rosenzweig, and I'm here with Jennifer Gooden. She's our science officer. And with Jimena, she's our compliance officer. I met Jennifer in an ILCN meeting a few years ago, and Jimena was our CFO at Fondo Mexicano for 23 years. I'm also very happy to see our evaluators. Hello to all of them. So we will be talking about a conservation finance solution that has to do with the big challenge we have here in Monterrey. We have a water security and climate resilience project in Monterrey, and our approach will be through conservation finance. Next, please. As you all know, not so many next. Just one next. As you know, this project, well, you don't know, but now you will know, it's located in Monterrey, Nuevo León, a city in northeastern Mexico with a population of 5.4 million people. It's the largest city in the Rio Grande Basin, and it's the second largest economy after Mexico City. Incredibly, we have reached last year a crisis, a water resiliency, and a day zero situation where many sectors of the city had no water at all, some of them for weeks. And as in the case of climate change, the most affected were the people of the and marginalized communities. And anyhow, it was a big challenge for the government to get things going. This year, 2023, doesn't look much better, so we have to address this water resiliency issue. Monterrey is located in a place, it's a semi-desert area. If it wouldn't be for the hurricanes, since we are in the same band as many deserts in the world, we would be a desert, but we have the hurricanes. So climate change, land use change, and the incredible growth of the city, thanks to nearshoring, and the possibility of having a city-state in the future when we get closer to Saltillo, which is another industrial city close by, makes it an imperative to look at water resilience right now. Next, please. So this is a map that we prepared. The one on the left we prepared when we started working with the Peregrine Fund Accelerator cohort. So we included all of the projects that you have been seeing today in this map, and obviously it's available to you, whoever is interested, through our colleagues at the Salazar Center. And you can see in the box, in the upper box, you can see an amplification of Monterrey. And in pink, you can see the two cities, Monterrey to the right or to the east, and Saltillo to the west. And what is in green is what remains of high mountains, and they have a huge influence in how we provision our water and how we recharge our aquifers. The image on the right reflects some of the potential priority areas for water recharge. And this is part of the story we will be telling you. We need to address the issue of water resilience, and we plan to address it by working on a 750,000 hectare polygon, which is in that picture, and is basically the area of influence, and that is more or less, if you multiply that by 2.47, that will be the number of acres that we have in that region. Next, please. So far in the past, and this is a recent picture of the Santa Catarina River. We will explain how it works and how it is related to a sub-basin, which is much smaller, which is 111,000 hectares. But so far, the solutions that we have been having since since they founded the city, have been engineered solutions. So we have channeled the river in 1953. We have constructed dams. 3 of them are providing water to the city. The dams provide 60% of the water, and the rest, 40%, is provided through deep wells. As I said, we have channelized the riverbed, and somehow the city has turned its back on the river. This is not exclusive to us. Many cities have done it, but I think it's a very sad thing to do. And as I said, the system is breaking down. We have a day zero already last year. Seems that we will have a few other day zeros this year. The water tables are dropping, and on top of that, every 10, 12 years, we have severe flooding. The last flooding was Hurricane Alex, 2010, and the academic sector prepared a socioeconomic valuation, and the loss was in the range of 20,000 million pesos. So roughly $1,000 million, if you would consider its rate of exchange of 20 to 1. And now, on top of everything, we have recurrent wildfires in the water basin. So all of these problems put together call for a new water management paradigm, one that works or that takes advantage of nature-based solutions, and one that looks at the big picture, which is not only the river and the corresponding sub-basin, but the whole area of hydric influence, which is this 750,000 hectares that I show you in the second slide. Next, please. So this shots from Landsat will give you an idea on how the city is growing. They are 38 years apart, but you can see that in many parts of the city has been a consistent and urban growth, and all of those areas that have increased urbanization are now becoming areas where there's very little infiltration and that contribute to the risk of floods. Next, please. So we have, for the last 3 years, we have been working in a project we call Rio Ciudad, which is basically a river city. So it's a new vision for a climate resilient city where nature-based solutions to water management are applied. As I said, our area of influence is 750,000 hectares, which would be 1.8 million acres. And the core area, the area that has to do mostly with the floods in Monterrey, is the sub-basin, which is 300,000 hectares, which is 257,000 acres. So for this project, we have secured the interest of the business community. We're working with the state government. We have approached all of the ministries of the state government. We have had conversations with them and with their staff for the last 2 years. And we have secured roughly $1.8 million from those. Like half of it have been already disbursed, but the rest is pledged. And we are also working on a mandatory utility surcharge that will produce roughly $7 million a year for watershed management activities, and that's exactly the aim of our project, which is to help the government make that project particularly efficient, particularly transparent, and functional. So, as a summary, this is something that's an ongoing project. We already have the money for planning and design, but we are still looking for some resources in this particular case to help the government put together this mandatory utilities surcharge in place. And again, I have to underscore this. This will be provide money that does not exist now, that will come from the water users, and that will help us make a better management of the 750,000 hectares that they are critical for the water resiliency of the city. Next, please. So, what's the problem? And the problem is that with this particular surcharge is that the government has limited resources for promotion and communications. They don't have at this moment transparent governance mechanism for the allocation of such monies. There is no GIS effective system that we can use to monitor, to have a baseline, and to have a dashboard for everybody to understand where the money is going. And there is also scattered information about aquifer recharge priority sites. Also, as we have many organizations working here, there is a very limited coordination of restoration activities. Every year we have forest fires in the water basin, and although some institutions are doing great work in restoration, I think there's an opportunity to have more coordination. So that's our problem. That's what we need to solve. And again, we will be concentrating from now on in our presentation on how to make this utility surcharge a real game changer for water security in Monterrey. And I will pass it on now to Jennifer to explain a little bit about our theory of change and the project profile.
Hi, all. Again, I'm Jennifer Gooden. I'm a science officer with Terra Habitus. So Lorenzo has given us a context for this program. In summary, we have political support for a new vision of watershed management in Monterrey, financial support for planning and design of an initial program, and a budding financial mechanism for ongoing watershed restoration. But if we don't take additional measures beyond this, there's a risk that the public could protest the addition of a surcharge to their utility bills, the risk of opaque decision-making, and risks of ineffective restoration targeting. So in response, we've developed this program with a mission to ensure that Monterrey's utility surcharge program is deployed effectively, efficiently, and transparently for maximum benefit to the watershed. So to make that surcharge program work effectively, efficiently, and transparently, we have 5 essential tasks. First, we have to launch a public campaign to explain watershed restoration to residents. This is not something that will be obvious to everyone. We need to develop an accountable multi-party governance mechanism to design an ERP-supported operation system. An ERP is enterprise resource planning, and these are the back-of-house systems that help with project management, risk management, accounting, procurement, things like that. Create a GIS portal for planning and monitoring and impact evaluation, and develop a public dashboard. So here we'd like to talk about our target community and our key partners. So the core beneficiaries of this program will be the residents of Monterrey. As Lorenzo said, it's a city of 5.4 million people, the largest city in the Rio Grande Basin. And they will benefit because the effective, efficient, and transparent use of money will lead to better restoration implementation in the watershed, and that will create increased water security, which is a major concern for residents in the city. So this is the primary purpose of our program. In addition, the people of Monterrey will also receive additional co-benefits, including reduced flooding, reduced catastrophic wildfire risk, and increased recreation opportunities and increased biodiversity. These aren't insignificant benefits, but we really focus on the water security as a primary driver. The figure on the left is, it shows the multiple interdependent roles in a watershed management partnership. And we see Terra Habitus as primarily occupying that center coordinator role, although we have some elements of some of the other roles together. This report actually, or the figure actually came from a report called Protecting Drinking Water at the Source. And I wanted to mention that because it was shared with us by one of our Peregrine mentors, Ben Guillaume from Conservation Investment Management. And it was help like this that pointing us to a report that talked about other watershed management programs that allowed us to learn from and build on what other people have done in places other than Monterrey. The other thing about this figure is that it highlights that while Terra Habitus may be serving as an initiator and a coordinator, this is really a major team effort. So there are a lot of people involved in this. Our essential key partners are the state government and the state water agency, a number of civil society organizations, and other collaborators too numerous to list, some of which include Cultivo Land, which is working on monetizing ecosystem services, the Metropolitan Environmental Fund of Monterrey, the University of Monterrey, and the Harvard Graduate School of Design. This is our impact diagram. I'll take a minute to walk you through it because there's quite a lot of boxes here. But what we're aiming to show here is how our key activities, which are shown in green boxes, connect to and tie to our intermediate and long-term outcomes. So you can generally look at this moving from left to right in time. And so if you go to the left, we have our starting point, which is a degraded watershed and insufficient funds for restoration. In our phase one, which is called Agreement, this is largely what we've been working on through the Peregrine Accelerator Program. We call our line of work there Policy Influence. We use the resources, which you'll see in a circle there, of a network of negotiation skills, some power of persuasion, to work with the state government and the water agency to get buy-in for a water utility surcharge program. We believe we are at a point where an agreement or a contract with those entities is feasible in the near future. And that takes us to phase two. So the top green box there is system design. And that's design of our administrative, technical, also including financial systems. For that, we need the resources of skills and staff, which we have in-house. And our intermediate result there would be effective financial and technical management, which would be indicated by solicited feedback from our whole team of partners. And moving down a row, another line of activity in this phase is data collection and analysis. This primarily includes the development of our GIS portal so that we can track and monitor restoration projects. For that, we also need skills and funding. And once we have that kind of system in place, we'll be able to implement a true adaptive management plan and mechanism for watershed restoration on an ongoing decadal basis. And so that will, as you know, with adaptive management is a cycle, you're creating new targets, and we would always be looking at seeing whether we were achieving our targets. And then the information that we get from our data collection analysis, both the GIS portal and some other research that's going on, will feed into phase three, which is a public communications and marketing campaign. For that, we need some resources that we don't have in-house, including graphic design and the development of multimedia products. But we anticipate that public communications campaign will lead to public support for the water utility program. All of these together lead to our intermediate outcome, which is increased amount of resources that are deployed for restoration on the ground. And then finally, to our ultimate outcome, which is a more resilient watershed, resilient to climate change, and ultimately providing more water security for the residents of Monterey. So some takeaways here are that the essence of this effort is making the water utility surcharge program effective and accountable to the residents of Monterey who will be funding it. And if we succeed at making this surcharge program effective and accountable, then the broader Rio Ciudad program will increase water security and climate resilience for 5.4 million people, the poorest of whom are currently most at risk. This goes a little bit deeper into a couple of things I just talked about, our needs and our outcomes. So in addition to funding, which we'll talk about later in our presentation, our lines of work require several resources. The first is knowledge, and specifically knowledge of our aquifer recharge areas. We wanted to mention this because this is a change from our original proposal that you may have seen. And we originally thought that we would be asking for support for this as part of our Peregrine ask. But we've commissioned a study of this, and we're now focusing our program here solely on the development of the governance mechanism and the public outreach campaign. For our work, we also need a network, and we've invested a lot of time and energy into developing that, both with partners who have been part of who have been colleagues of Terra Habitat's team for decades, and also with new partners in government agencies in the water department and those who would participate in the delivery of the restoration mechanism. And then finally, we need skills in the design of administrative and technical and financial systems. And this expertise that we largely have in-house within the Terra Habitas team. So in terms of additional resources that we need for this project, by and large, we either have the expertise on the Terra Habitas team, or we're actively working with our partners to secure that so we would have all these resources in place. And again, this is specifically for the non-financial resources. So all of this work together then culminates in the whole reason we're here, which are our outcomes. And because we have a program that is nested within a broader program, we've defined our outcomes and measurements for success at two different levels. So our program outcome would be increased funding from the utility surcharge program that would be deployed to nonprofit partners and government agencies for watershed restoration. And we would measure that by the number of dollars that go, the amount of funding that goes directly into on-the-ground restoration. And we feel very confident that that number would be significantly higher if the appropriate governance mechanisms are in place than it would be otherwise. If all that happens and the funding and resources are deployed effectively, we would get to an ultimate outcome that's a restored water basin that's resilient to drought and catastrophic climate events, providing water security in Monterey. This is our timeline. We feel pretty confident that we could have a collaboration agreement with the state government and the water agency just after the first of the year. By summer, we could have administrative, technical, and financial systems in place and a GIS portal in operation. And then by August, we will, by August, we would be able to launch our project and communications campaign.
Thank you, Jennifer. So I forgot to mention something at the beginning. All of the pictures of wildlife that you have seen in this presentation are taken in the Santa Catarina River, and of course they were taken by a great photographer, a friend of mine from National Geographic, Carlos Navarro. Serment did this pro bono, but this gives you an idea of how resilient, even in the current degraded condition of the river, it hosts a wonderful diversity of wildlife. So, as with any project, especially projects that have to do with governments and with complex situations at this scale that we are tackling, the first challenge is that government decisions are sometimes political, well, not sometimes, always political, and sometimes unpredictable. So that's one big challenge. Also, the new surcharge that they are planning is a very low surcharge, equivalent to roughly 30 cents of a peso for every cubic meter of water supplied, which in a typical household will be like $0.50 per month. There will be reluctance of citizens to pay more taxes and fees. I mean, that's always a situation. And so we have to be very careful how we frame all of communications and how we show early on results. So we also have risks that we are looking at. One is that the crisis in 2024 becomes so bad that it diverts political resources and the attention of everybody, or that we have other environmental crises, or that in the end, government opts for engineered solutions instead of nature-based solutions. Next, please. So what are we thinking in terms of budget? We prepared 3 levels of potential funding. The first one, which is the low end, with $75,000, we could launch a public information campaign and set up the enterprise resource management system for the model, which in turn would give us a robust system for dealing with more complex responsibilities in the future. With $100,000 of a gift, we could do the same 2 things, plus training key personnel at the government and funding part of the GIS portal, which is our new challenge. And with $200,000, we could fund a good percentage, almost 80%, 70% of the GIS portal, and put together in a specific web page for the project, a public dashboard for everybody to follow on what the government is doing with this money. These amounts that I am showing are not net of overhead. As in many institutions, we have an overhead charge of 12%, and so that would have to be deducted. Next, please. So this is the project, and I have to say that the experience with Peregrine Fund Accelerator has been an amazing experience, because not only was it really fun and it was very well organized and structured, but it allowed us to put together relations or to create relations with our fellow colleagues, and as in many processes, this had some extra bonuses, and I want to show two of them. One of them has been mentioned by our colleagues from Pro Natura and from Bat Conservation International. We're putting together an agave nursery to participate in the regeneration of burnt areas in the region. So that's a very attractive way of working together and something very tangible and very appreciated. And this nursery will have two lines of income to achieve financial sustainability. One will be obviously to provide to the cityscaping or to the new way of landscaping in stress areas, which is providing a commercial supply of valuable agaves to the people in the city. And the other, and obviously the most important, will be to have a permanent, consistent supply of agave plants for restoration efforts. So that's a project of $250,000 that we are raising the money. Of that, we already have, as you heard from Rosario, close to $50,000. So that's very exciting. The other one, and this is my last intervention, the other one, we put a great name to that one. It's the Rio Grande Pool Finance Partnership. And basically what I did is, after learning to think big, thanks to the Peregrine Fund Partnership, I went to two places where I have been either part of the board or part of the technical committees, which is two large institutions in Mexico, funding institutions, and asked them if they would be interested in providing $1.5 million each for a 5-year program. And with those $3 million, we can go and have this challenge to a U.S. Funding institution and have a $4.5 million program over 5 years for funding water-related projects in the Rio Grande Basin. Of course, this is just a concept, but there's interest from part of the two Mexican institutions. So, and everything is still to be done, which is all of the governance, all of the design, all of the programmatic approach. But I think it's nice to think big, and this would definitely leverage resources in the region. Next, please. So these are our two extra bonuses, and Katie said that I had 25 minutes. I am almost done. So thank you, Salazar Center. Thank you to our mentors. Thank you, our fellows in the cohort. Thank you, Kathy, Jen, and Shoshana. And this has been a wonderful experience. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lorenzo. Great presentation. If you want to go ahead and take down your slide deck, we can have you and Jen and him out on screen, and I will turn it over to our evaluators. Go ahead, Johnny.
Thanks, Lorenzo and Jennifer. Great presentation, and great to see the outcomes that have already happened through your participation in the Peregrine and Accelerators program. It's really amazing that in the past 6 months alone, you've already seen progress. So my question is that I believe there is a water fund in Monterrey, the Metropolitan Water Fund of Monterrey. And I'm curious to know how your project interacts with or aligns or is working or partnering with that in the San Juan Santa Catarina River, especially.
Okay. I am a founding member of that board. It's Fondo. Originally, it was a water fund. Now the name is Fondo Ambiental Metropolitano de Monterrey. This project has been presented to them. We are in the process of formalizing them in the financing of the GIS portal and the priorities. They are doing complementary priority recharge areas work, and they are one of the two institutions that are willing to commit this $1.5 million. So we are very close to them. And they are part of the project, and they are part of this collective of civil society organizations that hopefully will help us move this project through. They are very, very well connected with Servicios de Agua y Drenaje. They do lots of research projects for them, and they are also working on a second, an updated version of the water resiliency program for plan for 2050. So they are fully engaged with us.
That's great. That's very helpful. Thank you.
All right, Sitlali and then Faye.
Thanks. So Lorenzo, I'm just a little curious as to what are the sort of more community implications, or how do you envision this project as really like touching on the lives of communities? Like, to me, it's a project that covers encompasses such a large area as the city of Monterrey. Like, if you could just tell me how,
Yeah.
or Jennifer, sorry, I did not mean to just address Lorenzo. I'm just seeing him right here in my corner. But whoever wants to pick up this answer or this question would be great. Thanks.
Yeah, let me give you a short answer to that first, and then maybe Jennifer wants to talk also. In year 2000, and when I was the CEO of Fondo Mexicano, we put together a program called Watersheds and Cities, which started with 3 watersheds and cities: Saltillo, Mexico City, and Oaxaca. And the project has evolved into 12 watersheds and cities, and it has been funded for the last 22 years with close to $1 million per year. And it's a success story, but the most successful of the stories of those 12 watersheds and cities is the city of Saltillo, where the city of Saltillo has a monetary exchange or link with the communities in the Sierra de Zapalinamé, and the intermediary is a local nonprofit. And basically, communities will benefit because most of the management work in the watersheds is done obviously by rural communities. So the benefit for the city dwellers is that they have a more reliable water supply. But obviously, with that money, someone has to do the work, and someone has to do the soil stabilization. Someone has to fight fires or prevent fires in the early stage. Someone has to check for the health of the trees. Someone has to work on the reforestation. So someone has to be a community ranger and monitoring entity. So all of that we are planning on moving to the communities, and so that they become like the operational partners in the site for the project.
If I could add just one more thing to that, I think Lorenzo's addressed the urban and rural difference in communities. Also wanted to touch on the difference in communities as a social justice or social equity issue, which is that, as he mentioned, when we hit a day zero scenario in Monterrey before, it was the communities that were the poorest areas that were hardest hit. Lorenzo experienced that in Monterrey, perhaps others of you did too. Several years ago, I was in Cape Town for a summer whenever that city, Cape Town, South Africa, nearly ran out of water. Same exact story there. It was people who did not have access to resources and infrastructure who were queuing in lines to get access to water. And many people have talked about this as being something that major cities all around the world will face in arid and desertifying areas. So I think if we can get a blueprint in place for how to work with a watershed and increase water security in arid environments, this is something that might affect not only people in need in Monterrey, but that could be used in other places.
Hey.
Thank you both for that presentation. It was really interesting and exciting to see something like this take shape. I have 2 questions, and I don't know how much time we have, Katie, so I can just choose one. So my first question kind of builds a little bit on sort of the community piece that you guys were just talking about, but what types of kind of public education and outreach are you guys planning on doing as a part of your that component of your plan moving forward? Obviously, it's really important helping to community members to understand the importance of watershed management and what that means and what that means for them. So what's the approach that you guys have, particularly kind of related to that budget item?
If you want you want to answer first, Jennifer, or should I proceed first?
Go ahead.
Okay, so like in many environmental issues or themes, we assume that everybody knows what we know as conservationists. So we talk about watersheds and about pollution and the atmosphere and water cycle and all that. In reality, people know very little about how things work outside of the traditional things that happen in the city, like making a reservation in a restaurant or going to the bank or keeping a balance in your checking account. So it's a huge task to get people to just to understand what a water cycle is and how we depend on a much larger area than the city itself. It's a huge challenge. So for the last 3 years, we have been publishing in the printed media, and we have been also publishing in the digital media and different magazines, and sort of trying to communicate in simple words how we depend on the natural capital that surrounds the city and how vulnerable the city is and the development and everything to this. So our public campaign our communications campaign will address not only the urban communities, which are the ones paying, but also make a link so that they know they have partners in the mountains. And a key element here will be the enterprises, the private sector, the large corporations, because in the end, they have the biggest stake. 60% of the no, not 60%. 60% of the water, of industrial water in Monterrey, is consumed by bottling companies that do either beer, soft drinks, or just plain water, and they need water with great quality. So they also need to be educated. So our communication campaign will go across all of those sectors, and of course, like we are dreamers, like all of you are, and our biggest dream at this moment is to have the new Tesla plant, which is going to be operative probably in 2027, engaged in this project, because they will be putting a plant in the middle of the let's say of the watershed problem, which is the Santa Catarina River and the municipality of Santa Catarina. So we want to address private sector, we want to address citizens, but we also need to put together through the campaign this obligation of having a permanent governance of water. So of course we won't be designing the campaign ourselves. We have to go to experts, and that will cost. So that's more or less the simple answer.
Helpful. Thank you, Lorenzo. Jennifer, did you have anything to add on that?
I think I'll let you go ahead and ask your other question.
My second question,
short on time.
And I think I have figured it out, but I just want to make sure. So the idea is obviously, as you said, Lorenzo, the financing would come from the city, but the actual like nature-based solution practices would happen across the watershed, up in the upper watershed, also in the city, as well as kind of helping to do efforts there. Yeah.
There's most of the solutions will happen in the rural areas, but there's a very important solution in the city, which is reducing consumption and becoming responsible with the water. And the government now has a great campaign, which is be 100-liter citizen, which means that somehow you have to figure out a way of using no more than 100 liters per day. So that's the campaign. So reducing consumption in Monterrey, that is part of the solution also. And this is I am a little bit ashamed of telling you this, but there's like between 30 and 40% of water is not accountable for, which means either lost through leaks, not invoiced, or illegal at all. So part of the solution in the city of reducing that unaccounted water, reducing consumption, and of course improving the resilience and the functionality of the ecosystem so that they can provide nature-based solutions.
That was great. Thank you. Oh yeah, go ahead, Jennifer.
I'll add one quick thing there, which is that most of the watershed work that actually contributes to water security will take place in the uplands. But in the broader Rio Ciudad program, there is also work that will be done on the Santa Catarina River as it flows through Monterey. So there will be a big new public amenity with a lot of recreation opportunities that everyone can access. We didn't talk about it too much today because it's not part of the nature-based solution component to it, although it does have its own nature-based solution element.
Awesome. Thank you both. Really appreciate it.
Ernesto needs to ask a question. He's a local.
Yep, we're close on time, but go for it, Ernesto. This will be the last one.
Okay, gracias. Can you hear me well?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Alita, my wife, and I do 65 liters, and this week we will include our washer in our circuit of rainwater, so we'll go to 40 liters per day per person. At any rate, I enjoyed the grand vision, being a native of this area, and a fighter for these types of things for as long as Lorenzo or thereabouts. I think that it's a great project overall. In terms of strategy, I do have a question. Most water works in the world, which are progressive and really the ones that we should be sort of using as our benchmark, they are including the cost of caring for nature and caring for the watershed and caring for the water sources as part of the bill. So I would like to know the thought process of going to the people when this should be the responsibility of the company that provides the service, and why not go that route to make the provider responsible for the care of the sources of water, which is what's available in some of the good companies in the world. Thank you.
So somehow, Ernesto, and I don't have a clear answer to your question because, as you know, Servicios de Agua y Drenaje it's a government type institution. It's not fully private like Aguas de Saltillo, who is a company from Spain that came and has the concession for the provisioning of water. So Agua y Drenaje de Monterrey is sort of like a hybrid public institution, state agency with a lots of private participation in its board and advisory committees in its governance. However, you know very well that the transparency is not one of the characteristics or the virtues of government agencies in Mexico. And so the risk, and yes, they should be providing, given that they make a profit. At this moment, we are not sure if they are making a profit. I think it should be a shared responsibility, and it has to do a lot with pricing of the water, because here we're talking about a specific price of water that we already have, but then a surcharge for taking care of the water basin. But in the end, it's a pricing item, and it's a very sensible item because they don't want to increase prices. So I don't have an answer to that. I think a good first step would be to put together a very clean, transparent, effective, and accountable mechanism for spending that little surcharge that they are proposing, and then building on top of that. Because once people see that there's some responsibility and some evidence that the money is going the right way, they probably won't mind having an increase in the price of water. But at this moment, it would be a political disaster, and they would never, ever consider that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Right. Thanks, everyone. With that, we have reached the conclusion of this 2-day set of presentations. So thank you all for your time and participating in this. I think our decision in the next 24 hours, that process is going to be really, really tough. Everything that we heard over the past 2 days is really exciting and compelling work. And as I mentioned at the top this morning, as well as yesterday, we've recorded this whole thing and it'll be available both to anybody who's interested, but as well to all the teams if you all want that as a tool in your toolbox to share with partners and funders. And we'll be making an announcement next Wednesday on which of these 9 teams will receive additional funding from the center to implement their proposed solutions. We've also had a number of funders tuning in on the Vimeo stream over the last 2 days, and any and all who are interested in connecting with any of these teams more and learning more about their work. We are happy to facilitate that. That is definitely one of the intentions of this final presentation event. So with that, I will let everybody get back to their afternoons. Thank you so much all for your time and participation the last 2 days. And we look forward to sharing updates with everybody soon.
Thank you.